CNET is all ready. I will go ahead and call to order the Board of Supervisors regular meeting for Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and we'll go to the Township Manager for announcements and roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to members of the board, staff, and the public for joining us this evening for the June 20th regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a hybrid meeting with the option to attend virtually and in person here in the main meeting room. If you are in attendance virtually using the Zoom platform and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please say your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on when the chairwoman calls on you. If you are attending in person with us in the main meeting room here and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please address the board at the podium and state your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on. Prior to commencing the meeting, I have a few short procedural items to cover. First, members of the public attending using the Zoom platform, you are asked to remain muted during the meeting to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. If a member of the public is acknowledged by the chair, they may unmute their microphone for their question or comment. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes may accurately reflect the action taken. And finally, a roll call of the Board of Supervisors will now be taken to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate that you are here when your name is called. Ms. Strickland? Here. Ms. Stevens? Here. Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Gracie Griffin?
Here.
Ms. Deneni? Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, up next is public input. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak on a matter not currently on tonight's agenda. Yes, you could come to the podium and give us your name and your township of residence, please.
Good evening. My name is Omari Patterson. I'm in Ward 2. I'm actually just around the corner here, about half a mile away to throw a stone. I come in to say thank you to the board. A little bit of context. I think it was probably a couple of months ago. You guys took up a tough topic, the Whitehall Regional Park. Some little bit of some issues there. But actually, in listening to kind of the dialogue you were having, a couple of ideas kind of came to my head about, number one, there were some priority use agreements in place. Number two, it kind of spurred the kind of the usage of other fields and parks throughout the township. And so I have two children. I have a 12-year-old and a 5-year-old, very active in baseball and soccer. And so they use these fields throughout the township, throughout the center region. And so I just want to thank you guys for kind of your leadership in that, because at least as an update, there are some parks that my son's team didn't have access to, and so they're starting to kind of open up a little bit more. And because of, I think, some of the questions that you guys were asking as a board. So really just wanted to thank you for your leadership on that. Over.
Thank you. It's so
Thank you.
appreciated, and really glad to hear about those, the use of our parks. It's always good news, so thank you again. Any other public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes from June 6th. And did we need any changes or corrections to those? And if not, we'll take a motion to approve.
This is Patty. Motion to approve the June 6, 2023 regular meeting minutes.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. All right, thank you. And next up, we have our authorities, boards, and commission reports. And first is the Center Area Transportation Authority report with Omari Patterson.
I probably should have stayed up here. Good evening, Omari Patterson. The CATA, Center Transportation Authority, has been stable last few meetings, kind of working through budgeting, good, bad, ugly. But at the end of the day, I appreciate, again, your board leadership and thoughtfulness. Thank you, Madam Township Manager, for kind of leading the way on the local match. There were some, rough roads, but it is Ferguson Township that continues to say, okay, let's we need to fund CATA. We will continue to fund CATA. It's kind of an integral part of our organization, and so I think it led others to just going ahead and kind of the first domino to fall, at least as I understand it. So thank you very much for that. So just keep that open mind, and I think the next thing that I see as a kind of big thing for CATA is making sure that our people, our residents, understand CATA Go, because it is such it's a cost savings for CATA, but it's a win for township residents that don't live in those kind of central lines. And so being able to kind of get the message out and the word out to everyone about it, kind of increase that ridership. And then, it's a good problem to have when you have lots of people and it's like CATA goes over, too full. But right now it isn't full enough. So we need to just get the messaging out. And CATA's in the process of putting together their marketing plan to make sure more and more people know about it and can use it in connection with the regular bus. Kind of almost like a mini Uber, if you will. But it's I think that's kind of the breadth of things. Number one, local match, and number two, just kind of the marketing and making sure that more and more ridership thus far. And that is my report. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Did CATA just have a fair out at the Nittany Mall for, I think it was like accessible ridership fair or something? Because I was wondering if that might be a good place for because I've just seen some of the older residents struggling with the CATA Go app. Because it's a separate app, as I understand.
Truth be told, I had problems with the app too, and
Okay.
I've let the leadership know there that, look, I use apps all the time, and this one's not doing so well for me, and so asking others that aren't so tech savvy to use it is probably not a good thing.
Right.
But it's part of the marketing, right? It's as easy as click, things like that.
Right. Okay. I just didn't know if we could have it like maybe somebody go to the Active Adult Center and work with them in case anybody there uses it or something. As I said, it's people of a certain age that struggle with it.
Yeah, they have, at least in other communications, they have kind of the information for people that have traditionally rode some of the lines, and so they have reached out to them. And so you're right, they need to just kind of broaden that marketing and make sure it's in place, and they're working through that now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And then, thank you for bringing up educating residents about CATA Go, how to use it and where it's available. So I think once that marketing material is put together, if we can, have that on our website, and if we could include maybe even whatever there is out there now, if there's something that would be easily included in an agenda that I could point to at a future meeting and let people know here's an easy way, or on the website, I think. I don't know when that material would be ready, but to be able to get something out before too much of the summer goes past, when we could maybe include a lot of people who don't normally ride, who are out of school for the summer. So however we could facilitate getting some of that information out, I think is great. So thanks for bringing that up. And thanks for your report.
Right on.
Appreciate that. Okay, next up is the University Area Joint Authority report with Mr. Westclieve.
My name's Wes Glebe, and I live in Ferguson Township. I took over a seat on the UAJA board from Lisa Strickland, and it's the best thing I ever did. I I really love the authority. It is so well run, and I hope you'll keep letting me be your representative, because between me and Mark is obviously the wizard with numbers, and he sits right next to me, and I'm always amazed at what he can see on a page that's just a blur to me. But he sees it. He sees little anomalies, and he asks questions about numbers. And so I'm not going to talk to you about numbers tonight because it just doesn't work for me. I wanted to make mention, because everything about UAJA is water. And I'm sure Lisa knows that. I don't know if everybody realizes that it's water. So that's what makes it run. And there's a drought watch that was declared by DEP, I guess today. So, and they're asking people to voluntarily conserve. So on to Corey Miller's the head of UAJA, and Jason Brown is his second. And so Corey always does up the notes that I'm supposed to convey to you guys. And I'll try to do that, but I don't want to labor over them. So number one, I think each of you has a copy of this. Number one's the Scott Road Pump Station replacement. And that has been done for a while, but the generator, because of the supply chain problems, I think the generator is now fully in and connected. So there was always a backup generator, but the one that was prescribed for it is now in. Number two, ozone disinfection. I really don't want to read the whole thing. It's just that for a long time, the final stage of disinfection was UV lights, and they are a real hog as far as electricity. So now we are in the process of switching over to ozone, which is a much more radical cleanser. It says in here, it breaks down different pharmaceuticals and chemicals, and it costs less as far as electricity goes. So, I mean, it'll take time to amortize the new buildings and all of the construction, but it says, you see the number there. The most exciting thing for me is this anaerobic digester and sludge dryer. They're putting in 4 large, I don't know what diameter they are, but maybe they're 20 feet in diameter and 40 plus feet tall. And they're going to terminate the composting program, and everything will go into the digester. You'll have less compost, but the advantage is that for the sludge, you'll capture all the methane, and which you didn't with the compost. And that methane has already been agreed to be purchased by Columbia Gas. So there's an advantage to the environment and the cost savings. And along with that, you can see, if you read down, the plan is to, I know the borough already collects food waste, and it's not an easy program to manage, but they want to expand it to all the townships. And the plan is to have food waste from Tyrone and Bellefonte trucked in. So it's really an exciting step forward in terms of keeping methane out of the atmosphere and having all that food waste not have to go into landfill, which is what the standard has been. And you can read down, there's stuff about grants, and maybe this will happen, and maybe that'll happen, and we hope it does. Meeks Lane, that got designed and going in the right direction, and then Corey went out and met with the homeowners, and they came up with a new plan, a better site, and so that's working its way through. Number 5, I guess, is, I don't know how many people know about the dispute with the borough. It's working its way through the court right now. It's unfortunate from my perspective as a new board member, but because there were protocols that were supposed to be followed, and for some reason they were ignored. And then number 6 is the rate increase. And basically that rate increase is due to number 5. There's no mistake about that. So it's just a wait and see situation, how the court rules. Does anybody need to know anything more about any of those? I mean, if you do, you can always call me or email me or Mark, and there's some mention here, you can go on the UHA website too. So, now, the second thing I handed out was a paper by Walt Eball, that's Dr. Walter Eball, and it's a very interesting paper, I think. I think it's a story about what the future of water is going to be in the center region, and how we could benefit by recycling our reuse water. So I hope you'll take the time to read this. And again, if you want to know more about it, or you want to talk about it, feel free to call me or talk to Walt. So, there was a piece in the Gazette about the food waste recycling. I don't know if any of you saw it. For some reason, they didn't mention the UAJA. I'm not sure why, but it's just how the media goes. Any questions?
Thank you so much. Questions for Wes? Yeah, I was kind of curious too why the UAJA connection with the organics recycling test wasn't a bigger part of that, but, or, you know, the announcement of it, but I guess it's,
Well, that's what those
test right
biodigesters
now,
will
yeah.
be for. I mean, once the program gets, the head of this solid waste came in and talked to us, and my takeaway from what he said was, is that it's not an easy program to get going. You have to have places for people to take stuff, or you have to have certain kind of bins or special bags. It just, I don't think they've nailed all that stuff down yet. So,
well, thanks very much, and thanks for bringing us
Okay.
the paper as well. Okay, no special reports this evening, so we'll move to COG and regional committee reports, and first up is the Human Resources Committee.
So I got quite a lengthy report that I could definitely share all the details, with anyone that would like. But to get into a few snippets, one of them was the compensation classification study results. Just a few things from that. in the study, we found no employees were being paid above the competitive market range. 62 were paid within the competitive range, 69, including the 15 in libraries, were paid below the market range. So about half and half. A couple people in the committee did say, well, it doesn't look as bad as we had anticipated. So the plan is going forward to get the 69, or at least the recommendations, get the 69 up to the bottom of the market ranges. GovHR kind of recommended going, targeting for about like 50% within the market, and then over time gradually bumping up, not necessarily just dialing that up to the top there. And then next year they are looking at implementing COLA and merit increases, and all this is going to be determined by the general forum, of course. And then later on, addressing wage compression where it exists. That is something that sometimes comes out of this, and being able to address that properly. This year for salary increases, it's projected it would cost around just under $39,000. With the COLA and merit cost, without the study, the total came around $430,491. With study implementation, we're looking at about a little over $450,000, so not too far off. The executive director pointed out COG, agencies and programs, spend about $10 million a year in personnel cost. And this implementation impact is about 2.5% of that, so relatively small. And then we accepted the report, forwarded the committee comments on to executive committee.
Questions for Jeremy, Corey, Patty? I just have one. So on that $430,000 number, so that's without the study. So that's just COLA.
Yeah,
and
looking
merit
at COLA and
for
merit increases
2024.
for 2024,
And then with the study,
just over 450,000.
and is that because?
So a difference of like $20,000.
And why are those so close? Because money's taken from insurance reserve?
Yes, I didn't include that, but they are going to, it's broken down, and it was in the agenda packet. I think it was in the agenda packet or in their slide presentation from the meeting, what they would take, I think like this year and next year in their reserves. They said that balance right now is more than healthy, so they'll be able to withdraw from that, but also keep that at a healthy balance.
I think it's 300 something.
And there is definitely an eye on municipal budgets. And I know our municipal managers are like, gotta keep it within budget, so, you know, they are trying to be cognizant of that, so.
Because I thought that they only wanted to take 100,000 from insurance reserves in 2024.
Sounds about right. I thought I also
And then
saw
I
a
thought-
$50,000 dollar number somewhere as well.
For 2025,
For
I think.
2025.
So then I was just, so if the 430 is only COLA and merit,
I have to look back at that as well, because in November this year, they would like to implement pay increases based on the study, which is about $39,000.
but that's just for one quarter.
But I think that was actually already budgeted.
Yeah, that's already
that's
budgeted, but
already
that's
budgeted.
just for the one quarter,
Okay.
right? And the total was 250 something. I guess, I don't need to know right now. I was just-
Full year implementation cost $252,000.
Okay. We'll talk more about it when I get to executive committee too. So,
Okay,
yeah, so I
perfect.
guess I'm just curious about what is just COLA and merit? if it's at 5% and 1.5% for next year, what do they expect that to be? The 430? That's what I'm looking at.
That's what I'm
Okay.
understanding without study implementation. Actually, I think it did have
And then
that
with
slide.
study, it should be another 250,000. I think, but I could
At
be
least not the
wrong.
way it was, at least not the way it was presented to me, but something to
Yeah, I
definitely
think I'm just
confirm.
missing a number in there, and so I don't need to know right now. It doesn't matter.
For the insurance reserve funds, they're approximating 100,000 for 2024 and 50,000 for 2025. Not
Okay.
to go all over the place, but since you had asked, it was
Yeah.
right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that, and then we'll talk more about it when we get to executive. Because I'm asking because we talked about it there too, and I guess I had a lingering question from there.
Oh, yeah,
so.
that was today, so
That
yeah.
was today, so we'll get to it again. So
Because I was actually trying to watch your meeting and I didn't see the recording for it. I'm like, oh, that's because that meeting's going on now today.
That was today, so I'll recap that, and this was a large part of the discussion. So other questions on HR for Jeremy? Not seeing any, and we'll go to Climate Action and Sustainability Committee.
Hey, I'm back. All right. Again, I had another lengthy report, but we did review the quotes for consulting services for refuse and the refuse and recycling contract. Recommended one of the two proposals that came in. Looked at a budget amendment for parks containers, so Whitehall Road Regional Park will have all 12 containers that they were slated for. They were only going to go with 6 for now and then get the other 6 later, but there was some extra revenue that came in that made that possible. And then we authorized the COG executive director to send a letter of commitment to apply for the participation in the Pennsylvania Solar Centers Get Solar Communities program, which will help get more people on board with solar. Had a great presentation on recycling in Center County. Definitely would encourage you to go take a look at that on the SharePoint site. And we briefly touched base on this 82 climate action adaptation plan actions. We'll discuss that at a later meeting. And then food waste diversion pilot update, that is now ongoing. I was just talking to my wife as to what we put in that compost bin. We are participants in that pilot, and anyone can go onto the COG website to sign up. So,
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Questions for Jeremy? My only question was, can paper bags, because I signed up for the study, and so if your food scraps go in, the paper bag can go in the bin too, is how I read it.
check the handout that was given in the email, because I do recall they were mentioning like specific types of bags.
Paper, okay.
Maybe it was more of a type of bag where any of the liquids
Mhm.
didn't ooze out and create a mess. I happen to have a 5-gallon bucket there. You can basically use any container, but if you are looking for something you can just throw in there, definitely want to make sure you have the right type of bag to do that. No plastics though.
No.
And even something that says compostable isn't being accepted.
Mhm.
I actually heard of one location that used to do a lot of compostable recycling. They've actually had to scale back because it appears maybe some of the stuff that is labeled compostable isn't necessarily something that can be composted in our area, or so just basically food scraps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, up next is the Public Safety Committee. Patty.
Thank you. And we sort of went over the program plan for emergency management, fire, and code. Nothing that we haven't seen before came to light there. I then Sean Kaufman talked about Code Red, just a system that, it's a county-run system for alerting in the event of sort of natural disasters or things like that. And anyone who's interested in signing up with Code Red can go onto the Council of Government under Emergency Management tab and sign up to receive those alerts if you choose. And let's see, and the interesting thing that I learned too, as I was getting my education on the program plan versus the CIP, I had asked the question about, in the CIP, we talked about getting the HVAC for the College Township Fire Station. Apparently that was a mistake. It shouldn't have been in there because there's an MOU between College Township and they take care of that building. So that was clearing up that little thing. The other two things that I learned that were sort of interesting to me, we were talking about the supply chain issues. Remember we went through this with Whitehall Road Regional Park and the some electrical component or something. But apparently they're having that same issue with that new development out on East College Avenue, the one across from Hickey's up there on the hill.
Oh, yeah.
They're having trouble getting some of their electrical things, and then the development down here on West College, they're having trouble getting their elevators.
It's the same developer too.
And so, yeah, so apparently, some of these, it's gonna be pretty tight with these move-in dates, to get these things in and then inspected by code, et cetera. So, but that's about it for public safety.
Thank you. Okay, questions for Patty?
Real quick, you had mentioned about supply chain delays. One thing that I'm curious about, and I can find out later, there was supposed to be a Holiday Inn out on Drabella Street. It's just a empty shell constructed building, windows, house wrap on it, but nothing's happened.
Huh.
Don't know if it's supply chain issues or just an abandoned building at this point.
Yeah. No idea. That did not come up from code, so I did not hear about that.
Other questions for Patty? Not seeing anything, so go to Finance and Facilities Committee. The joint meeting agenda is in the packet. And Executive Committee, as we said, we met today. I guess two main topics of discussion. The first was the class and compensation study. In the agenda, the motion was for the study to general forum in July for acceptance of the findings and implementation of the findings. So there was concern that finance hadn't reviewed it yet, and what we understood from our packet was that there hadn't been a total consensus in HR on implementing
That is correct.
the recommendations. Okay, and then we just haven't discussed it as a municipality. So I had preferred to bring it back here and have a discussion prior to having it brought to general forum. So there was a motion made and adopted that the study go back to Finance Committee for review, and then to the general forum as the presentation that probably you received as well. It's probably the same presentation that we received today. So very in depth, and we have the entire report attached to the agenda. So I was comfortable with that and moving that forward as a presentation for anybody who hadn't been in any of those committee meetings. I think in the future for something like that, it would probably make sense to have a joint HR and finance meeting like we do for facilities and finance. So, because I was kind of surprised that it hadn't been discussed at finance independent from program plan. So I guess for 2023, we already have a certain amount budgeted for that last quarter implementation, but you can't really do that without adopting all the findings for 2024. So it was a long discussion about that, but I was comfortable with where we left it. Let's see, for the study itself, I would have liked to see more discussion on the phasing of the implementation of the findings, and that was, we didn't have a discussion on that. So you know, whether that was maybe had in HR, you know, that might be something to bring back at finance, and I can certainly bring that up. So anyways, that's where that's at right now. The other thing that I thought could have been considered either at finance or, you know, probably finance would have been the best place, is I didn't see a need to adopt all of the recommended findings as a wholesale implementation when it's not like we are just stepping each person up by a percentage or like a block of dollars over a certain period. Everybody was getting whatever brought them up to market rate. So it made more sense to me to look at it in the budget as salary corrections there instead of having the general form adopt the entire implementation. So I kind of disagreed with having it pushed through just so the recommendations could be adopted wholesale when I didn't think that was necessary for this. Anyways, we'll leave it at that. We'll have that presentation, and any questions or concerns we can bring to finance on that as well. The other thing, and I won't get too deep into this right now because there's a lot of information in the agenda, was the questions that we had posed about Millbrook Marsh. Staff went back and answered those, and I thought really well. I thought they provided exactly what we were asking for. A very quick summary was that in 2018, Millbrook Marsh and the Active Adult Center were brought into the regional parks grouping. So they are under the purview of Parks Capital. So that's how, that's where that status is right now. And so they're currently under the formula of the regional parks. And that the advisory committee doesn't have oversight of operations and funding. They just do give general guidance to the park authority on direction of development for the marsh. So I think at this point, what I think would probably be helpful is everybody kind of look back. I don't know if everybody had a chance to actually read the executive committee agenda where it has all these attachments. They have minutes from old meetings about where all of this was decided. It was very helpful. So I'd recommend everybody go back and read that. You can see one note is that when Millbrook Marsh was taken in by, under the umbrella of CRPR, it was assumed that it would be independently funded and outside funds could solely keep it running. So in either 2017 or 2018, I think, and I didn't even have a chance to read through every single set of minutes, but it seems like maybe what initiated this original conversation of bringing it into the regional park system was a request for capital funding through the budget process. And so they had to stick it in somewhere. So that timing could be off, but it seems like that might have initiated that original discussion. So I guess to say, I think in the parks governance, in parks capital, and in the authority, all of that information is helpful. I think for this board to help facilitate our representatives on those committees coordinate the plan to discuss fundraising and a funding formula, the COG funding formula for Millbrook, and maybe all the regional parks. I think if we can coordinate that with those three groups, and along with the timing on whatever's going to happen with the boardwalk, I think that could be our next discussion, is how we best move that forward. The idea that each municipality has a regional park is not entirely where we're at right now. So I think the funding formula could be changed. I mean, I think it would be appropriate to look at it differently. So I'll leave that at that, but I'd suggest everybody read that, and we'll bring that back for another discussion in the future. Questions on that?
I didn't know if you wanted to add anything on the compensation study. I was just gonna, well, if I don't lose track of my thought. I think there was some concerns within HR just how to implement it, maybe not necessarily just saying we're gonna accept everything and run with it. But also another thing to at least keep in mind, we don't want to necessarily like abandon this completely or strip it down to where there's like almost nothing being implemented. We want to be mindful of the people that are working for COG and being able to retain them and keep morale going, as well as even help with recruitment efforts, which have been somewhat tampered by where we fit within the market overall.
Mhm.
So.
Okay, and I can't off the top of my head think about when that finance committee discussion will be, but if that's the general idea that, you know, we either phase implementation or, you know, supplement with insurance reserve or other fund balance monies, I think that we've seen some head nods. So I don't know if we'll have that finance committee meeting before we have our next meeting, since our early July meeting is canceled. So
Yeah.
any other thoughts, feel free to communicate that to me before finance.
Sounds good.
So, but we won't make a decision there, so it'll come back to the general forum and we'll have a chance again to discuss it before that. Any other questions on those committee reports? And we have no other committee reports, so we'll move to staff reports. And first up is the public director's report, which was included. Anything to add, Mr. Moderator?
Today we had our 90% design review meeting with the architect for the building renovation project, so I will add updates on that project to future reports.
Thank you.
Nothing else to add to the written report.
Thank you. Okay, questions for Mr. Moderator? And seeing none, thank you. Okay, Planning and Zoning Director's report. Any questions on that? That was attached as well. Seeing none, move to the police chief's report, which was attached. Anything you'd like to add or highlight?
Nothing to add, more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Chief Petrick?
No, just a thank you though. I did read that you had some officers participate in the torch run for the Special Olympics, the summer games that were canceled, and just thank you so much for supporting that effort. That was really amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for mentioning that. And the manager's report.
I'm happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair. Provided with the agenda packet is a copy of my report.
Thank you. Questions for the manager?
I didn't see a manager's report today. That's
Oh,
something.
okay.
Okay.
That doesn't show as an attachment on mine either.
All right. Well, we will get that corrected.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
All right, thanks very much. And next up, we move to unfinished business. The first item there is the extension request for Salvation Baptist Church preliminary land development plan, and we'll go to Mr. Jeff Ressler.
Thank you. So in your packet, you have the request. They're asking for a time extension for the Salvation Baptist Church preliminary land development plan. The board granted approval with conditions on November 1st, 2022. And for resolution 1996-17, staff is only permitted to accept 3 time extensions after a plan has received approval with conditions. The applicant has submitted a letter of map revision, a LOMR, to the Federal Emergency Management Agency that is still under review and is requesting a 365-day extension of time to complete that. So the recommended motion would be that the Board of Supervisors grant the time extension for the Salvation Baptist Church preliminary land development plan. Any questions for me?
Thanks very much. Questions for Jeff on this item? Was there public comment on this item, or?
Well, kind of. Back probably 2 months ago, the church, I'm Joe Lichty Engineering, here to represent Salvation Baptist Church. A couple of months ago, we sent a letter to the board, I'm not sure if you got it or not, regarding this project. And they requested, they had a couple of requests, and we never got any official word back as to what was decided or what could be decided. Back when the church built a volleyball court and did a crossing of the floodplain several years ago, probably 5 to 7. At that time, the township requested that we do a detailed floodplain study to make sure that there would be no flooding off of the property. At that time, we did a study. We submitted it to the township. Township engineer reviewed it. Everybody said, you're good. Then when they submitted this land development plan for the new fellowship hall, which is going to be built right next to the church, Jeff responded with comments that we needed to do a detailed study. Every time I got that comment, I wrote back and said, we already did a detailed study a couple years ago. You guys looked at it, reviewed it, and said it was good. And so we went back and forth every time the letter that he had the same comment on there. It didn't really say we had to submit anything to FEMA. So once we got to the point where it was approved with conditions, I came in and sat down with Jeff, and then he mentioned that we had to submit something to FEMA. So we pulled it together. We submitted a Loma C, the chain letter of map amendment to FEMA with the same information we submitted a couple of years ago, which did establish elevations of the property, of the floodplain, 100-year flood on the property. It's currently a Zone A flood, which is an estimated floodplain. FEMA only goes up each stream so far, and then they say, we're not going to do a detailed study any further than this because it's really not necessary. We'll establish that floodplain any way we can, and they draw a line on the map. So that's what we have on their property. So where was I?
So is this pertaining to the request this evening, or?
Yeah, well, no, not this evening. I mean, yeah, that was in the letter too.
Okay,
We were asking for the 365-day extension.
Right,
It
so
was
here's-
back when we submitted the last extension.
Okay, so if there's a comment on tonight's item, go ahead and share that.
Well, this letter that we wrote to the board, which the board should have received, we never got a response to, and I'm trying to explain to you what we were requesting in that letter. And part of it was to get an extension, because we did a Loma C. The fee to FEMA for a Loma C is $550. We submitted information that would be good enough for a Loma R, but we submitted that to FEMA. We got a Loma C back from them approved. Basically what a Loma C says is that no structures on the property and no proposed structures are within the floodplain. So I submitted that to Jeff, and he said that wasn't acceptable, that we needed to do a Loma R. Well, we went back and started checking. The fee to submit a Loma R to FEMA is $8,000 and can take up to a year for review. So we wrote a letter, we explained everything, how we did everything, and what they asked was, the first thing they asked was they wanted to be forgiven from having to do that. Another $8,000 could be going into their fellowship hall. And they wanted to see if that was possible. Then the next step was, if they absolutely positively have to do the Loma R, they want this 365-day extension so that they don't have to, well, you can only do so many of the 60-day extensions. And we've depleted all of those. And so that's where we are. And we never got a response back saying, no, we won't, we won't bend the rules at all. we felt like we should have gotten a response, a written response from
Madam
the
Chair,
board.
this is in front of you this evening for staff to issue a response to,
Yes,
in
that's what
response
this
to the
item
letter.
would be.
Thank you.
So, yes, so that's the conclusion of your comments on this item. We'll look for staff, any staff input that they care to share, and then I'll be looking for a motion.
Thank you. Staff has no issue with the request that's in
Okay.
front of the board and would recommend granting the extension.
Thank you. Okay, so this.
Okay, so we granted the extension, but we don't know anything about
We haven't
the other
taken the
things
motion.
that they asked for.
Well, that would need to come separately in front of the board, so we're.
Staff would
Well-
manage most of the responses. In terms of process, we would just refer the applicant to follow the process.
Well, we wrote a letter to the board. Don't all letters to the board get read at a meeting? Or don't you get them so that you can read them? I mean, a letter was written more than 2 months ago to the board, making that full request and explaining more than what I just explained about, you know, the history of it and everything else.
What
Did you
the
not
board-
receive that letter?
Pardon me, what the board's being asked to review tonight is a request for an extension. If there is an issue with the zoning officer or his discretion on the issue, that needs to be taken up separately.
Well, we did take it up separately. We wrote a letter to the board 2 months ago, and we heard nothing so far. How do we take it up if we don't write a letter to you?
Provided with the agenda packet is a copy of the submission and is being reviewed.
Well, that's the letter from 2 months ago, or just the extension request? I submitted an extension request last week because the old extension was running out, and if we let it run out, then the plan would be denied. We don't want that. It's been approved, everything except that one issue. And that's why we wrote that 2 months ago at the last extension. And we sent it to the township, addressed to the board, so we felt like the board would read it and respond to it. Or
I did
ask
not
us to come
receive.
in and respond to it.
Thank you. If you would be happy to send that to me, I'm happy to provide that to the board. I did not receive a letter from you, so I cannot speak to the letter. I can only review the application that's provided in the agenda packet that was forwarded from planning and zoning.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I'll look for a motion.
This is Patty. I move that the Board of Supervisors grant the extension for the Salvation Baptist Church preliminary land development plan.
And
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is new business. The first item is the consent agenda with 3 items. Did anyone care to remove any of those items for discussion? And if not, I'll take a motion to accept the consent agenda.
This is Patty. So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, thank you. And next is a proclamation of the Township of Ferguson Center, County, Pennsylvania to recognize July 2023 as Parks and Recreation Month. And we'll go to Mr. Progar.
Thank you, Chair. Provided with the agenda is a draft proclamation to recognize July 2023 as Parks and Recreation Month. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm just bringing it up so that I can read it. Okay, and I will read the proclamation. This is a proclamation of the Township of Ferguson Center, County, Pennsylvania to recognize July 2023 as Parks and Recreation Month. Whereas parks and recreation programs are fundamental in the creation of unity between communities throughout the region, including Ferguson Township, and whereas Ferguson Township houses 12 well-kept municipal parks, each offering a wide range of amenities such as a variety of trails, sports fields, play equipment, pavilions, and more. And whereas the theme for this year's Parks and Recreation Month is where community grows, thereby encouraging community involvement and growth as parks within Ferguson Township provide environmental space to build a healthy and active community both physically and mentally. And whereas parks and recreation programs encourage healthy lifestyles that aid in the prevention of chronic diseases and provide therapeutic restoration services to improve the mental and emotional state of all citizens. And whereas these programs assist in the improvement of the natural recreation of water quality, flood prevention, groundwater protection, plant and wildlife habitat preservation, and the quality of the air we breathe. And now therefore be it resolved by the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors that July 2023 is recognized as Parks and Recreation Month in Ferguson Township. Proclaim this 20th day of June 2023. And I will take a motion to adopt the proclamation.
I'll move that we adopt the proclamation outlined in section 11.2 of the agenda packet.
This is Patty, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Just thanks for putting together a very nice proclamation. Much appreciated. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, thank you. Okay, next up is a public hearing on an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances of the Township of Ferguson Center County, Pennsylvania, Chapter 15, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Part 4, General Parking Regulations, Section 403, Parking Prohibited at all times in certain locations, Section 404, Parking Prohibited in certain locations, certain days and hours, and Section 406, Parking Time Limited in certain locations, certain days and hours. And we'll go to Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. At the June 6th meeting of the Board of Supervisors, the Township Engineer provided you a presentation. He is making his way to the podium, and you were provided some drawings that had sight distance lines and some parking spaces. In addition, you were provided a draft ordinance, which was advertised for a public hearing. So the Township Engineer is here tonight to review that with you and or discuss any modifications that may have been suggested since we last met.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have no intention of going through the full review of all the plans again, but I did want to bring to your attention one thing that came up after the last board meeting, and that regards parking along East Pine Grove Road. So I'm going to pull up this plan again just to take us to that point. And so here's the big picture. Here we are. Post office is up here on the left. You can see how that looks. And then coming down Pine Grove Road in this vicinity here, the plan had called for all of this parking to be removed. There was some miscommunication between myself and a resident who had concerns about sight distance coming out of this driveway. After the meeting, we got to talk, and I was like, well, really, I don't have an issue looking to the right, back towards the post office, just down to the left, where it was previously posted. So this area in here, which is currently available for parking, the current ordinance removes that. So if the board so desires to maintain those parking spaces, we can do that by a simple modification to the ordinance. I printed out, it wasn't in the packet, I printed out some copies that James has there, and I also have a Word version of that that I can share as well. And let me just do my little share juggle. And so here, essentially is this. It's the same ordinance that we saw the last time with deleting and adding, but I've highlighted just a couple of rows in this proposed revision. I just call it draft revised, and there were just a couple things that we had to change in order to establish that section of parking in there in front of those houses. From talking to Centrice, I understand this would require a re-advertisement of this ordinance since it's a substantive change. So that's an option for the board to do that, to re-advertise the ordinance as it's drafted here, as was passed out to the board members. And in essence, then, these two modifications, one row was modified, one row that was added. Nothing else within the ordinance itself changed, all the rest is the same. But by doing that, you would then effectuate this, allowing these parking spaces to remain. There are probably two spaces that we can actually mark there. The reason for that is there's actually a curb cut right between these two houses. It's not much of a driveway, it's more like a walking area, but I don't think we can legally mark a park space in front of a curb cut. So we can mark the other two, so they'd be designated spaces. So if a person that lives there chose to park in front of their own driveway, that's up to them and how it may or may not be enforced. But I don't think it would be fair for us to mark that space off. That is something that they use for access between the properties. So we'd be looking at adding in those two spaces that I just designated there in red, if you chose to. Questions for me on that? I apologize for the miscommunication I had with the resident that necessitated the explanation tonight.
No, thank you for bringing that back to us. We'll take questions real quick here before we proceed. Yes, Jeremy, do you have something?
So all those spaces would then be, well, you said not to, where to curb cut.
Yeah, so right now, there's this space that's shown in green is available for parking. It's nothing is marked, obviously, out there currently. But since we're marking the parking spaces, we could mark a space in front of 141 and a space in front of 145, but here where this access is between the two structures, we would not feel comfortable marking that because it is a cut. There's another one similar to that further to the east on Pine Grove Road, and again, we skipped that. There's no real driveway behind it, but it's an access into the yard area, and we would be blocking somebody's permitted access. So again, we wouldn't be signed no parking, we just wouldn't mark the parking space, if that makes sense. So not too unlike what we're doing on Nixon Road, where we're having the signs to allow parking, we're just not marking the spaces.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for clarity? We'll have more discussion in a moment. But I'm seeing none right now. Corey, you can just speak up if you have any just clarifying questions at this point.
And Corey, I think Jeremy sent you as an email the draft.
Yeah, you'll get that momentarily,
Okay.
just to keep everyone on the same page.
I'm good for now.
Okay, thank you. This was advertised as a public hearing, so I want to, at this point, open the public hearing for public comment on this item. And if anybody cares to speak on this item, please come to the podium and give us your name and your township of residence.
Yes, I'm Matt Heller of Ferguson Township, High Grove Mills, and I just want to say thank you so much, Mr. Seibert, as well as Mr. Modricker joining us online, for taking the time to work through this with us as residents and better understand the issues that, may have been there with the site, minor sites, and also losing those important parking spots for the neighbors of those houses. So truly, thank you for taking this. This, to me, is just how government should work, and I really appreciate the time that you spent to listen, so thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, other public comment on this item? Okay, I'm seeing none, so I'll close the public hearing. And we have two possible motions here. If anyone needs to discuss anything before making a motion, we can. One is to just adopt the plan as is without those two extra spots. The second recommended motion is to ask staff to update the ordinance to include those spots. Then we'll go back, re-advertise, have another public hearing, and adopt the new, newly modified ordinance, which would give 2 more spaces, which I would be supportive of.
Yeah, I would support that too. It sounds like that's what's needed out there.
To be concise, basically we want to take the recommendation of the engineer with the updated ordinance, re-advertise and group back. So that's my motion.
Oh, this is Patty. I'll second that motion.
Okay, so that is essentially recommended motion number 2, asking staff to update the ordinance
Yep.
amendment to include the 2 additional parking spaces and also re-advertise for action on the ordinance amendment. Okay, and we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Ms. Martin said this was a public hearing, so do we need to take, I guess we could take a roll call on this. But since we're not
But it would
adopting the
not be
ordinance,
required
we
since we're
don't.
gonna
Right.
kind of do a redo at the
Yes.
July 18th meeting.
Yes.
So there's not a
There's no
need to do
adoption.
a roll call
Okay.
because we're not doing an ordinance enactment.
Right, okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Everyone involved in that was very helpful. Okay, up next is a public hearing on an ordinance of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, to amend Chapter 15, Motor Vehicles, Part 2, Traffic Regulations, Section 201, to allow setting a maximum speed limit of 35 miles per hour for eastbound Blue Course Drive between Westwind Drive and Circleville Road. And we'll go back to Mr. Moniker.
At the June 6th meeting of the board, we did review this. So staff worked with CATA to relocate a bus stop. That is in conjunction with a capital project that we have planned for a section of Blue Course Drive. CATA expressed concern about traffic speed on eastbound Blue Course between Westwind Drive and Circleville Road with the relocated bus stop. Township engineer conducted a traffic study. This section of roadway meets the criteria to be posted at 35 miles an hour. Staff prepared a ordinance for adoption by the board at the public hearing tonight. That ordinance is within your packet, and the recommended motion is in front of you also.
Thank you so much. This is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing for comment on this item. And seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the ordinance outlined in section 11.4 of the agenda packet.
And this is Patty, I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion on this item? None, just, again, a lot of thanks for all of the work on this. It was much, much appreciated.
Also, the cement pad for your bus stop's been poured.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you. So if there's no other discussion, this will be a roll call vote.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is a roll call vote for ordinance 1088. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Gracie Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Madam Chair, it passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, and then next up is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, authorizing the filing of an application to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development for a Strategic Management Planning Program grant. We'll go to Township Manager.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. You may recall last year, shortly after I was appointed in April, I brought to the board in July a recommendation that we conduct an organizational assessment, particularly with an audit of operations in the administration and the finance and tax department. We received that report, you may recall, and we had a series of recommendations that we were able to implement, and we have begun the execution of some of the recommendations. For example, the implementation of the agenda management software that we released for the first time for this meeting. But we, as we've continued through the implementation and also held a leadership retreat to facilitate conversations and carried forward the implementation of some of the recommendations following the organizational assessment, there's been continued conversations about how we might be able to further advance the goal of conversion from more of a paper-based workflow to digital technologies, but also kind of reevaluating, work plans and understanding that there's a variety of different ways as to how we can increase efficiency. And then as these conversations have carried, and as you may recall, recently we were at a PML presentation for elected officials here in the State College area. And as part of that presentation that I gave to PML elected officials in that room, I was contacted following that presentation from a DCED representative, the Department of Economic and Community Development, Miss Lisa Burns, and she had actually made the trip out here to Ferguson Township, spent several hours, had a tour of facilities, went out to Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3 with me, and I showed her just the varied dynamics within and among the wards, but also the beautiful scenic, landscapes that we have here. And as part of those conversations, we really initially were talking about various grants that would help with that economic development strategy and master planning, but we also talked a little bit about other programs such as what I had presented to the PML elected officials, and she introduced the what do we refer to it? We refer to it as the Strategic Management Planning Program Grant. And that grant, as provided in the agenda packet and the narrative, details the methodology that DCED requires for organizational assessments. It's only provided to municipalities. There are no, generally we see these types of programs in some cases only awarded to municipalities that are in financial distress, but this particular program recognizes the need for, you know, as we look at the 2,400 local government entities in Pennsylvania, we're all kind of in this post-COVID, what I refer to as a reset mode, and really looking at how do we look at our resources and how do we start to increase that level of efficiency. And this type of program is really a continue, you know, it would provide a 50% match to continue what we've already budgeted. So in the 2023 operating budget, you may recall, we have about $25,000 allocated to do the organizational assessment in police, and the plan is to continue to do these assessments in all of the different departments. And with this grant, they would do they would do an assessment on the last 5 years of all budgets, all work plans, understanding that they will look at our standard operating procedures and really trying to assist us in moving forward with a plan that, if implemented, positions us for short-term, long-term financial sustainable resiliency, which is ultimately the goal that has been established following the organizational assessment and the scope of work to which we put in place last year. So I could go on and on. I find this to be a very passionate topic and part of you know, the plan that I've really established my platform on as manager to serve the board. Ultimately, the goal is so we can, you know, as we look into the future, we understand we have the stormwater fee. It was certainly a way to provide, to offset expenditures and really kind of maintain focus and long-term sustainable practices. But, you know, down the road there, as part of the presentation for the CIP last year, we discussed various alternative options the board might consider as we continue to look at some of those expenditures increasing over the next 2 to 5 years to maintain the level of quality municipal services that we do. And it's really ensuring that with this report, we'll be able to see, okay, well, as we move forward with efficiencies, how can we be sure that we're not putting burdensome on any overwhelming burdensome on the taxpayer. So with that, I'll stop myself and see if there are any questions pertaining to this program. With the approval of tonight's resolution, the grant submission would be done tomorrow, and the resolution would be submitted tomorrow. And it's my understanding that DCED will be reviewing all of the applications as early as early July in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Thank you so much. And this is a public hearing, so I'll first open the public hearing for comment on this item. If there is any public comment, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and I'll ask for a motion.
This is Patty. I move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution.
I'll second that.
Okay, and discussion on this item.
I just think it's exciting. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely exciting. I've been passionate about that as well, understanding that all of us here, we represent people, we are here to serve people and to be able to provide more efficient operations that continue to give our residents better services, if not enhanced services, and being able to, you know, be there for them. You know, it's a win for everyone.
Corey, any comment?
Nope, this has my 100% support as well.
Thanks, and I agree with everyone. This is just such an important and great tool to be able to tap into. So hopefully this is successful, but if not, I think it's given us a great idea of how to move forward with this kind of planning and research and study of our conditions and the future. So fully supportive of this. And so we have a motion and a second. This will be a roll call vote.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is a roll call vote for Resolution 2023-26. Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Gracie Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks for your work on this. Okay, next up is communications to the board, if anyone has anything to share. I'm seeing none. We have a number of calendar items listed in the agenda, and if there's nothing else, I will take a motion to adjourn.
This is Patty, so moved at 8:15.
I second, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.